What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our SEC football channel. We're going to do a recap of the 2019 season for the Ole Miss Rebels. This is the first video we will be doing, but I hope to do more teams. Hopefully we do all the Power 5 teams and at least do all the SEC teams here on this channel. We're going to look back through the season and then also look at the expectations compared to the results. So we'll look at some different predictions and see how everyone did from the preseason. Here is the schedule. Here are the results from each game. They lose to Memphis 15-10 in a game that I think a lot of people expected to be much more high scoring, but it was a defensive battle. Memphis came away with the win. I don't think there's any shame in losing that game on the road. Memphis turned out to be a really good team, and Ole Miss had a chance to win that game. So that was actually a pretty impressive performance by Ole Miss. I came away from that game thinking, wow, this defense is going to be pretty solid if they were able to hold a high-powered Memphis offense to 15. But I was surprised that they didn't do more on offense. And then Arkansas, they turned around, and we didn't know how bad Arkansas was going to be, but Ole Miss looked really impressive in that game. Matt Corral throws for 246 yards, Scotty Phillips 143 yards on the ground, Elijah Moore 130 yards receiving. So they had all three of their main players stepping up in that game, and they won the game easily. And then Southeast Louisiana, they won that one easily as well, 40-29. Then there was the game against Cal where they lost 28-20. And guys, this was a long time ago. This was September. I can't remember every game. I believe this was the game where they were stopped right there on the goal line, or maybe that was the Memphis game, and I'm thinking that was the Cal game where they came up just short on the goal line there and then would have had a chance to tie the game with a two-point conversion. This was not a bad loss either, because at that time, you see, Cal was ranked number 23, and they had one of the best defenses really in the country at that time. I mean, they were really good on defense, and the offense was better. They had some injuries there, and things kind of didn't go the way you'd hoped if you're a Cal fan. But yeah, that's not a bad loss at all for Ole Miss. They started the season off 2-2 and had a chance to win both of those non-conference games. And then there was the game against Alabama where they decided to go with John Rhys Plumlee, and this is when we got our first look at him. And boy, he did not disappoint. He had 109 yards on the ground, a quarterback rushing for over 100 yards against Alabama. This team overall put up 31 points against the mighty Alabama defense, and you saw that they had something with this kid. And if he could go in there and do that against Alabama, you knew he's probably going to be pretty special. They did wind up losing the game pretty easily, again, 59-31. Defense really let them down in that one, but still, saw some bright spots. They were 2-3 at that point before playing Vanderbilt, and they really showed up in this game. Won at 31-6. Plumlee got to start again, or at least he had the majority of the stats here. Again, I would, if I had time, I would go back and watch every single game and then do this video, but obviously there's just no way to possibly have the time to do all of that, so I can't remember all these games. But they won that game easily. Plumlee, again, over 100 yards on the ground, 165 yards on the ground. And if you're wondering, I know there's no title to these columns. It's passing, rushing, and then receiving. So you have the leader from each game, and I got this off of ESPN, just maybe giving a little bit more information than just the score. That's why I decided to go with these. But Missouri was after that. Missouri was a team that was pretty hot at this point. If you remember, they lost to Wyoming and then won, I think, 5 straight. Ole Miss played pretty tough. I mean, they played pretty tough in this game, but they lose it 38-27. Plumlee had 143 yards on the ground, but they used Matt Corral a lot in this game as well. He had 133 yards passing. Elijah Moore led the way receiving. And then they played Texas A&M and had a chance to win this game. Lost by 7, but it was the same story. They were right there in the game against Memphis, against Cal, against Missouri, against Texas A&M, and then against Auburn, a game where they struggled offensively, but the defense kind of kept them in the game, and then all of a sudden they had a chance, had the ball down by 6 points with a chance to knock off Auburn on the road. The record for Ole Miss, it's not great, but if you go and look at these games and you really look a little bit deeper, this team had a very good season, and I think they were probably the best 4-8 team in the country. New Mexico State was an easy win, 41-3 against LSU. The score wound up being kind of close, but I think LSU kind of let their foot off the gas a little bit defensively, allowed Ole Miss to get back in this game. Plumlee had 212 yards on the ground, and this was the game where everyone's saying LSU's defense is horrible. But again, this is a pretty good rushing attack with Ole Miss, with Plumlee back there at quarterback, and they put up a good effort, but they lose that game. And then, of course, there was the Mississippi State game where this game should have went to overtime. Let's just be honest. You had the Elijah Moore penalty at the end of the game. Just a horrible decision to let his team down like that. And as soon as he did it, I thought, they're probably going to miss this extra point. They did. They lose that game, and that would have been a big win. It probably would have saved Matt Luke's job. I didn't do a video on this, but I think it's absolutely horrible that they fired him. I think this team was headed in the right direction. I mean, you look at how close they were against good quality competition. I know the record was 4-8, but come on, you've got to give this guy at least one more year. The recruiting had been pretty solid. You've got some young freshmen that played this year. Next year, I think, had the chance to be a pretty good year. And you look at the coordinators he was able to bring in, former head coaches. I don't understand at all. I don't know if there was something going on behind the scenes. I know the players were disappointed, and that was just not a good decision in my opinion. But they got rid of Matt Luke, and we'll see what they do from here. I haven't really looked into their coaching search as of yet, so I don't know, who they might be looking at. But you had an interesting dynamic with Matt Corral and John Rice Plumlee, both who will be back unless somebody transfers or something like that. And I think both guys could be used again next year. Plumlee is just a ridiculous runner at the quarterback position. One of the best runners, I think, in the country. He needs to work on his passing game. Matt Corral is not a bad runner. It's not like he can't run, but obviously not the type of runner that John Rice Plumlee is. Corral actually had 135 yards rushing on the season. You had Scotty Phillips back there running the football. He wound up kind of starting the season as their main guy, but Jerrion Ely led the team in yards per carry at 6.9 and actually led, as far as the running backs are concerned, led them in yardage as well with 722 yards. He will be back. He's just a freshman. At receiver, Elijah Moore was really their go-to guy. They didn't get a whole lot of production from other spots. But you look ahead to 2020, and we'll be doing some early previews looking at who's coming back and all of that. But I'll just kind of run through offensively. They lose a couple of offensive linemen. Scotty Phillips is gone, but again, you've got Jerrion Ely, you got Snoop Connor. They've got backs that will be back with Plumlee back there as well. This should be a great rushing attack next year. And again, there are so many things that can happen, players transferring and all of that. But they should be pretty solid offensively. I mean, they really should. We'll see who they wind up hiring as their head coach. Defensively, they lose a lot on the defensive line. I think that's going to be a big issue for them. Lose a little bit across the board. You're talking about Kadir Shepard at linebacker, Jalen Julius at safety, Miles Hartsfield at cornerback. So some good players that will be gone. I think the defense probably will take a little bit of a step back, honestly. If you look at what they're losing. And again, this is a very early look at this. Benito Jones, a really good player. They're going to miss him in the middle on that defensive line. So that will be interesting to see. I think the offense could definitely improve. Defense might take a step back, and it's not like they had a great defense this year, but they showed signs at times, being pretty solid. So we'll, again, see what this team looks like next year, but that's really not what this video is about. We're recapping the 2019 season, not really looking ahead to 2020 just yet, but don't worry, that'll be coming very soon. So their season is over. They finished 4-8. Now let's take a look at the preseason predictions for Ole Miss and how those match up to what this team actually did on the field. And actually, it's interesting with Ole Miss because you're going to see these records, and they underperformed as far as their record is concerned. But if you look at how close they were in a lot of these games, I think just based off of how good they were, they maybe overperformed a little bit. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic here when you look at that. But here are the records from the predictions from last season, or from the preseason, I should say. Again, they were 4-8, 2-6 in the SEC. If you had a bunch of cupcake non-conference games, then Ole Miss would have went bowling this year. But no, they went out and played Memphis, and they played Cal, two quality opponents, and they came up just short in those games, and that ultimately kept them out of a bowl game. You see the predictions here. I had this team at 5-7. They did pretty much exactly what I thought they would do in the SEC. I believe I had them beating Arkansas and Vanderbilt, and I said that they would split the games between Cal and Memphis, and that almost happened. So I feel pretty good about my prediction. I think I had this team pegged pretty well. Our simulation had them at 6-6. I don't remember the exact games there. I don't have that information, but 6-6. That's what the FBI had as well. So they were a little high on this team. Athlon Sports also had them at 5-7, so they were the same as me. So I think everyone, for the most part, knew what we were going to get out of Ole Miss. again, the record doesn't show it, but I think this team actually was a little better than I expected. The defense at times was maybe not as good as I thought they would be, but the offense, I mean, they've got a lot of weapons, a lot of young players, and I think the future is bright for Ole Miss if they can get the right coach. I think they already had the right coach. I think Matt Luke was doing an excellent job. So now you risk getting rid of him and bringing in another guy that maybe won't be the right guy, maybe won't be the right fit, and they could actually go down a little bit. So that's going to be a big key, seeing who they get as their head coach. Will they have to take a little bit of time and rebuild, and will it be a new offense that the players have to learn? It's almost like you're starting over, and I think that really erases what this program had already built. And I think, again, it's a horrible decision, and we'll see. Only time will tell, but unless they get a home run hire, I just don't like the decision to fire Matt Luke. Again, we will see what happens in 2020, and we will give you an early look at this team coming up once the season is completed, once we finish the bowl games and the playoff and all of that. But this just wanted to do a recap for this team, and I'll be going through all the teams that missed out on a bowl game. Let me go ahead and knock those out here in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll recap for the other teams after they play their bowl game. So give me your thoughts on Ole Miss. What'd you think about their season? What'd you think about the decision to hire or fire Matt Luke? Anything you want to add about the Ole Miss Rebels, feel free to do that down in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports SEC Football Channel.